Why, God? Why?
Zachary. How many times do I have to tell you? Call me Steve.
Sorry, Steve, what is this?
You asked for a new Integra. I gave you one.
No, we wanted the coupe.
How many doors did the first one have?
5.
Bingo! Just be happy it's not a crossover. I gotta go. Tom Brady is asking if he can stop playing again. I said you can stop when I win my money back.
Wow, that's an awkward relationship. Sorry, Tom. It's the first time I feel bad for Tom Brady.
Folks, if you know anything about me, you know that I am, if nothing else, a road warrior. You may not be able to trust me for weight loss tips or how to keep your hair, but when it comes to travel, I know how to do it. I don't mess around. I only go with the best, and I don't have time for garbage. And that's why it's so fortunate to be sponsored by someone like Carl Friedrich. They've been sending us their luggage for about a year and a half now. I went from the carry-on to the check-in, and now the carry-on pro. Guys, this thing is sick. Hardcover, super durable. It's got these amazing wheels with these awesome bearings and rubber tires on it. Me and Zach just dragged 3 different pieces of luggage through the Newport airport, and it was shocking how much better the Carl Friedrich bags rolled, especially for long distances, than the other lesser luggage. And now with the Pro, it's all about this front pocket with a laptop case, holders for pens, for your travel documents, and it's a hard-sided exterior panel. What that means is when I travel, I don't have to take a backpack anymore. This can now be my only bag. If I'm on the plane and need to get my computer out or a pen or a notebook or anything like that, I don't have to open the whole bag in front of everybody. That was my whole reasoning for carrying a backpack, was to get stuff out mid-flight. Now I can just get at the exterior of the bag from the outside. Plus, with the hard shell case, I don't have to worry about my laptop getting smashed or knocked around. This thing is awesome. You can get different colors to match your boots or your other luggage. I love this camel kind of brown that's going on here. This thing is really durable. It's really functional, and I love traveling with my Carl Friedrich luggage. They make just great stuff. So I'm super stoked to spend the rest of the year traveling with the Pro. Hit the link in the description. We've got a special price if you want one yourself while supplies last. And thanks to Carl Friedrich for sponsoring not just this video, but all the other ones in the past, because I love their gear.
God, for better or worse, has a point, but we're going to get to the Integra story in the context of that in a little bit. This is, of course, the 2023 Integra. This is the A-spec model with the technology package, and I'm going to explain what all of those specs mean in a second. Now I'm going to tell you the good and the bad about this car. We're going to take it for a drive, do a little interior tour, but we're also going to answer 3 questions. 1, is it better than the Civic it's based on? 2, is it better than the German competition? And 3, why does it have 5 doors? Before we drive, it's time to talk about some of the basic numbers. The Integra starts at $30,800, or you can get the A-spec package, which is like an aesthetic change for a couple thousand more, or the technology package, which should be called the everything package. That's how you get the manual transmission, the limited slip diff. You get a better stereo, a bunch of interior treatments we're going to talk about later. But the most important thing, of course, is the manual. If you want the manual, you have to get the top of the line $35,000 car. You cannot get it on the base car. If there's people out there that would rather have the base car with a manual, comment below. The engine is the same 1.5 liter 4-cylinder turbo you get in the Civic Si. Makes 200 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 192 pound-feet of torque from 1,800 to 5,000 RPM. Pretty good power band. The weight is impressive. It's just over 3,000 pounds. This one, with all the nice stuff, all the options, is 3,073 pounds. And it's actually 9 pounds lighter than the base model with the CVT. Very impressive. It's also the lightest car in the field market by a long shot. Like the BMW 2 Series weighs almost 3,600 pounds. The CLA and the Audi A3 are both a couple hundred pounds more than this car. Now, 200 horsepower does not sound like a lot, because it's not a lot. Especially when you think of cars like the Elantra N that has 270. But that is a lower class of car technically. We'll get to that later. In the field this is in, with the Audi A3 and the CLA and the 228i, This is the lightest car, and the power to weight ratio is actually really, really good. This has a better power to weight ratio than every Integra that came before it, except for the Super Type R. Suspension is fully independent, but it is not double wishbone at all the corners. You have an independent rear suspension and a McPherson strut in the front. We've got 3 driving modes, comfort, normal, and sport. They change the usual things. They change the steering effort a little bit, throttle mapping slightly, and with this technology package, we get adaptive dampers, so it changes that as well. All right, that's some basic stuff. We're gonna get on the road. I'm gonna talk to you about how it drives, how the different modes feel, and then we'll do a little interior tour. First, let's start with a launch. Let's see what this 200 horsepower can do. It holds about 45, slip. A lot of spin. We're going to talk about that. It'll chirp to second if you get it right. Red line is around 6,500. That's where it begins. And we're off. 0 to 60 for the Civic Si is 7.1. I didn't look it up for this. They didn't provide the number, but I can't imagine it's going to be very different, right? It's the same engine. We still have the same 1.5 liter, the same 200 horsepower. It's just not that strong. And it's honestly kind of disappointing. When you consider, the Civic Type R or the Integra Type R, yes, this makes more power than all of the Integras before it, other than the Type R. And the power to weight ratio is better than the GSR and other cars like that, but there's no occasion to this engine. There's no real sense of personality to it. So that's the disappointing part. I mean, inside you just hear an engine. It's very quiet. It's a very small 4-banger, and it sounds like that. It sounds like a sewing machine or any other kind of rotating mass that's like not really powered by anything. It's like a fishing reel, There's just not a lot of character to it. The shifter, on the other hand, is great. Honda makes amazing shifters, and this is no exception. There's a lot of bracing around the transmission and around the shifter, which helps with that shifter feel. There's not a lot of slop in the system. It is a cable actuated system, but whatever they do with their aluminum castings and their poly whatever the hell and their good ball bearings really shines through. This is the great combination of light enough to shift quickly, but accurate and sturdy enough where it feels like a robust system, and you can feel where the gates are. Shifting it is really natural, and the position of the shifter, the size of the shift knob, all of that is ergonomically excellent. Well done, Acura, Honda. Now, just a quick qualifier, we are doing this launch in Texas, where tight, curvy roads are hard to find and quite rare. We do have a few curves on this route, but it's not going to be like the canyons or the tracks or the things you're used to seeing. Second gear, full throttle. Shift, third gear, full throttle. Passing will be okay as long as you're the only one in the car and you don't bring more than a backpack with you. I think if you had, 4 people in this car, you're on a weekend trip, you better plan your passes very well. Plan well ahead, send notes, send RSVP invitations to the cars you're going to pass, give them a couple months notice, and then you'll be able to get by them. Now I'm going the speed limit here, and something you may be able to hear is a lot of noise. There's kind of a lot of noise in this car, but most of it I think is tire noise. The tires on this car, which are Continentals, not only are they pretty loud on the road, they also have a really strange amount of grip. They let go really quickly in a second gear corner earlier today. It wasn't progressive at all. There was no squeal, no noise. The tire choice was really surprising to me because this is the fully loaded version, right? I mean, this is the sportiest one they sell right now. And they didn't say if they're going to make an Integra Type R or a Type S. So we've got the manual transmission, the limited slip diff, all that stuff. And yet these tires feel like they're 900 tread wear, like they're made out of plastic, and they just slide a little bit. They make a lot of road noise, even on what relatively smooth tarmac. I'm just pretty disappointed in them, to be frank. If you buy this car, you should immediately get a higher quality tire, something with a little bit more grip and a little bit quieter ride, and it will improve the car a lot. Because the wind noise is pretty minimal. There's a little bit off of the side mirrors at 70 plus miles per hour, but keep in mind this car weighs 3,000 pounds. So if a car's gonna weigh 3,000 pounds and have all this tech in it, it can't be that quiet because adding sound deadening adds weight. I want you to think about the first Integra you admired or drove, the one that excited you, or maybe the one that you think of first when someone says the word Integra. It's probably the yellow Type R, could be a GSR. But it was those second and third generation cars that really made the name famous, right? Those are the cars that became the track cars, the drag race cars. They were race cars. They're the ones that got stolen a lot because they had some design flaws that made them very easy to steal. That's what we all remember. But if you go back to the first generation Integra, the goal of that car was to replace something called the Honda Quint. And the Honda Quint was literally a Civic with some nicer stuff in it. It was built on the Civic platform. It was just a slightly nicer version of the Civic. So when Honda decided to create Acura, they made two cars. They made the Legend, which was like a really nice sedan, and then they made the Integra, which was supposed to be a Civic with more luxurious features and a little bit better suspension. And that's what it was for like 20 years. You know, a lot of the parts were shared with the Civic. The Integra got slightly better stuff, or the interior design was a little bit nicer, maybe slightly nicer materials. That's what it was. And that's what it is now. That's why we have this car. So I think, and I know we all wanted a 3-door Integra with a big wing and an angry motor like you get in the Civic Type R. We wanted it to be that halo enthusiast front-wheel drive machine that we all fell in love with and that's stuck in our minds because that's how nostalgia works. But unfortunately, that's not how the entire car market works today because Honda doesn't make a front-wheel drive 2-door Civic anymore. They didn't sell well. Coupes aren't selling well in general. We can't blame them. The market's the market. People aren't buying them anymore, so they can't justify building one. It's a bummer, but it is the nature of the beast these days. Making a left up here, which will give me a moment to talk about wireless Apple CarPlay. So this car comes with CarPlay and Android Auto. Even the base model comes with it, but it's not wireless. If you want the wireless one, then you have to opt for the tech package. But there is no native navigation system in this car. If you do not have a smartphone when you get into this car, you do not have navigation. It has a compass. So if you have a map and you're a Boy Scout, Girl Scout, you have that training, you can find your way. But for everybody else, you're not gonna have any navigation whatsoever. And if you are out in the middle of nowhere where there's no cell service, if you're trying to pull up new turn-by-turn directions, I think you're gonna have a bad time. It's a small use case, but it is a real thing. It seems like more and more car companies are doing this. We've driven some really high-end stuff lately, really expensive stuff like the Rivian and the Lucid. Both of their navigation systems worked off of cell towers. They had a native navigation system, but it still worked off of cell towers instead of off of satellite. This car has 3 driving modes. You get comfort, normal, and sport. And then you can also make an individual setting to change all of those to your liking. You know, soft suspension, engine on sport. You can turn rev matching off or on, although it's buried in the menu a little bit. It's kind of frustrating, but once you know where it is, fine, and you'll probably just change it once. And I changed it in this car 3 hours ago. I've turned the car off and on, and it didn't reset, so it remembers what you want. Now the road has opened up a little bit. Let's go from 2 to 4,000 RPM. Little turbo lag. Not a lot happens above 5. Now it's pulling a little bit better in 3rd. I think they're pulling torque in 2nd gear a little bit. Acceleration is not really what I expected, dropping down to 4,000 RPM. If you start in 1st gear and launch it, it's almost like it gives you a little bit more boost. Now, let's talk steering because we actually have some corners to deal with. Steering is kind of weird in this car. I like the weight of it in normal mode. My individual setting, I have the steering in normal, everything else is in sport. Right there, just that little corner, I could feel and hear a little bit of tire scrub. I wasn't leaning on the tire a lot. This was not a tight corner, and yet they're skittish. They're afraid of the tarmac. They don't want to be near it. It's so weird. And what that does And I was talking to Travis Langness of Edmunds about this. We're trying to figure out why the steering feels kind of strange. It's almost like a car with really tall sidewall, where, here, you come into this corner, you turn the wheel a little bit, and it's almost like the car reacts 2 seconds after the steering input is made. It's as if the car waits to lean on the tire before it can press it into the ground, and then it sticks and then it turns. You know, it's not instantly reactive, which is what I was expecting. That's what you get from the Elantra N. It's what you get from the Civic Type R. I didn't drive the Civic Si, Matt did. I was out of town, so I can't speak on how that felt. But this, it just feels like the front wheels are a second and a half behind the steering wheel. It's weird. And I think a bit of it might be due to the tire scrubbing. Positive note, the chassis feels great. 3,000 pounds, it feels that light. Feels really neutral. It will lift the back a little bit under braking. I mean, I think with good tires and suspension, this would be a really fun car to drive. The chassis feels stiff. It's actually 5% stiffer than the Civic hatchback on which it's based, so that's pretty good. Brakes are the same across the lineup. Doesn't matter if you get the cheap one or the expensive one. They all have the same brakes. They're vented, not slotted, not drilled. If you're gonna do track day stuff, I'm sure you're gonna want pads and fluid. I have not been able to test them, to be fair. Maybe they'd be amazing. Speaking of amazing, the seats in this car are great. These are upgraded 12-way adjustable seats with lumbar support. If you get the base car or the regular A-Spec, you do not get the lumbar support, and your passenger has a manually operated seat. And this has the 16-speaker stereo, which is awesome. It is excellent. It is so clear. Yes, it's loud, but loud is easy to make. It is incredibly clear. You crank through the volume up 20, 30, 40, whatever those numbers mean. I mean, me and a bunch of other people that were on this launch were very impressed with how clear the treble and the mid-range is in this car. This stereo kicks ass. The interior has been a very comfortable place to spend the day. These seats have held me in really well. They're excellent. I think they look really nice in this red. I sat in a car with black interior earlier, and it just looked a little bit more mundane. Keep in mind, like the Civic, you only get cloth seats. These have leather and this kind of suede, micro suede insert stuff. But if you want it to stand out, get red. Everything is laid out really nicely. Buttons on the wheel. Hello, Volkswagen, are you listening? We got buttons on the wheel, volume knob, of course. I like having the little buttons for track, home, and back here. It just, the things you want to do quickly and not have to hunt for while driving, and you don't want your finger to move around, are really, really helpful. The screen reacts really quickly. The refresh rate is good. I like it. I like that. Got vehicle settings, trip computer, all the usual stuff in here, and here's where you can set up your lighting, your heads-up display, all that kind of stuff. But the screen is quick. A lot of stuff in here will look familiar if you've seen the inside of the new Civic. These the chain link fencing around the air vents is the same. The steering wheel is the same, which has an H here instead of the Acura symbol. There's a lot of commonality, which is why at first it was hard for me to see why you would pay the premium for the Acura, but that you do get things in here you don't get in the Civic. You have a full digital dash in here. You have some analog. The Civic is a mix of analog and digital. Screen can change into a bunch of different things. Looks really crisp. It's shaded really well. I haven't had a problem seeing it even with polarized glasses. You also get a heads-up display in this car. That is harder to see with polarized glasses. In terms of room, it's pretty good for people my size. I'm 5'10", 170 pounds. I've got a lot of shoulder room. I've got a lot of leg room. I can sit behind myself, which is excellent. You know, if you get an A3, you're losing a foot of car. The car's a foot shorter, so this probably has more rear seat room. But if I wore a helmet for a track or an autocross, it would be very close to hitting the roof. This seat is all the way on the ground. It's as low as it goes. You know, so if you are going to turn this car into a track car or an autocross car, if you're over 5'11", it's probably not going to be that comfortable. Your head's going to be jammed into the roof, and it's going to be right at this seam, you know, between the sunroof and the rest of the car. It's going to dig into your head. The competition in this space, this $35,000 price range, is fierce but kind of disjointed, right? This is like the upper limit of where Elantra or Veloster are. You know, they're technically not luxury brands. They do give you a lot of the same niceties that this car has, and they come with way more horsepower. I mean, those both have 270 horsepower, even more if you hit the overboost and grin shift thing. But the Elantra N has nearly zero options. You know, you can get DCT or manual, but you can't get leather. I'd say the interior doesn't look quite as fancy. The buttons are just a much simpler, flatter plastic. You kind of get what you're paying for. You get a lot of performance and you get a lot of features, but they're not dressed up that nicely, right? It's James Bond, but he's wearing jeans. With the CLA, with the Mercedes, the BMW, the Audi, you're going to end up getting the stripper models, okay? I mean, like the 228i, which is a very weird-looking car in my opinion. It's a front-wheel drive car. It's over 3,500 pounds, makes a little bit more power, but it's very heavy, and you're just in the base model. To start adding options, you're cresting $40,000. Same with the Lexus IS. It has more power, but it starts at 39. The CLA starts at 38, and then the Audi A3 is priced more comparatively, but it's a foot shorter, so you're going to either lose trunk space or passenger space. So when you think of that, the Integra does live within its own little world of like entry-level luxury that delivers a lot of stuff in a really smart-looking, smart package.
This video started with some questions, and now it's time to answer them. Is it better than the Civic? Well, it's certainly nicer. The adaptive suspension and adjustable seats alone make it a better place to sit for a while. I can't say it drives better, though. The cars are just too similar. As for the competition, I'd rather get a loaded Integra than a German car that hardly comes with window switches. After I filmed this car, a lot of people on Instagram were asking me a new question. Why? Why was this one so slow? Why isn't it a GSR or a Type R? Why isn't it an exciting, high-revving, raw machine? It's because that's not what Acura needs to sell. What they want, and what the first Acuras did, was bring a new group of people into the brand and turn them into lifelong customers. We enthusiasts also need to remember that not every Integra was a screaming punk rock machine like the ones we fell in love with. A lot of them were just nice cars, driven by nice people. Through that lens, this is indeed a nice car, and nothing more. Let's hope a future special edition can change that.
And remember, always fight your tickets. Use code TST10 on the Off the Record app available in the Android and iOS store, or go to offtherecord.com/TST.